My face currently feels like I've been run through by Tom Stewart.
Puts it to the top of the square. Oh, beautiful little fist in there by Dale. Crucial centimetre moments.
He definitely has a bit of the Belcho spirit. As I have a bit of the Belcho spirit.
Hello and welcome back to the only podcast that brings you content with the professionalism and consistency of an AFL team. Unfortunately, that AFL team is Hawthorn without James Sicily. This is The Back Pocket. My name is Jack and I am joined, as always, by the world's #1 Alex Murkoff fan, Alistair.
Oh, that is me. No, it's definitely not me.
It might be.
Poor lad. I think he's out with a heart problem for the rest of the year.
Heart problem?
Yeah.
Don't tell the COVID conspiracy theorists. They'll be all over it.
No, I don't think it's anything like that, but hopefully he's good for next season.
He's too big. He's probably what it is.
Yeah.
Hard to pump up that much blood.
It's true.
Body.
What is he, the second tallest player on a list?
Like 210 or something centimetres?
Yeah, ridiculous.
Too many
Anyway,
centimetres.
what a weird
Behind
intro.
mate Colina.
Good old Colina. Sounds like a brand of cleaning product or cat food. I'm not sure which one.
Dog food, for sure.
Mate Colina.
Yeah.
Well.
Feed your best friend, Mate Colina. This episode is brought to you by Mate Colina. Who's your first vote?
I don't know. My one vote goes to Keaton Coleman.
Fair enough.
From the Brisbane Lions, playing at half back.
The Brisbane Lions.
On the weekend, I think he's taken Rich's spot entirely. I'm not sure Rich will be back this year.
That's why you don't drop yourself, kids.
Did he drop himself? I thought it was Gunston.
No, that was the original. Yeah, it was Rich and Gunston, but then it turned out that they didn't actually drop themselves. It was like they had a discussion. But yeah, he was one too.
All right, anyway, 23 disposals, 10 marks, 7 intercepts, 4 1%ers, 4 rebound 50s. It's pretty average, but 606 metres gained and looked like he was everywhere for them. Really gave them the drive off half back. Obviously, they slaughtered Richmond, so maybe it's a bit inflated, but he played really well, and I'm happy to give him one.
The games this weekend were either beltings or really hard to watch, so I kind of get where you're coming from.
It's tough.
It's hard to do much better than that, but yeah, no, I totally get that. My one was to Tom Barrass. I thought he was really good. He had 9 spoils and 4 defensive high pressure acts, but as well as that, had 20 touches, 7 of those contested, 9 intercepts, 14 marks, 5 intercepts and 3 contested. Really ran the back line again. I thought Hearn was also really good. But yeah, Tom Barrass, nice to have him back in the votes. I think it's his 3rd time he's been mentioned this year, but obviously not as big as he was last year.
I feel like they're just getting smacked too hard for us to be giving him votes. Obviously I'll spoil an honourable mention here. I thought Nick Vlauston was best on ground for Richmond, but he doesn't get a vote for me because they just got pumped too hard.
He was in my special mentions for the same reason.
And maybe we were a bit lenient on West Coast last year. They weren't losing as badly, but Barrass was far and away one of the best last year.
Yeah, totally agree.
My 2 goes to Jacob Wiedering. Again.
Jacob Wiedering was my 4.
Your 4? Okay,
yeah.
Wow. He is playing spectacularly without Young in the back line. And I know Young was in the team, playing ruck. But 17 disposals, 9 marks, 9 intercepts, 4 rebound 50s, 3 1%ers. I don't know his contested one-on-ones. I'm sure you have that.
Yeah, I do.
You don't?
I had him lower because I gave a bit of a tax for the belting, and then I went, it was just such a good game. He had 3 spoils, like you said, won 6 out of 6 of his contested defensive one-on-ones, 6 pressure acts. Hawthorn only had 6 less inside 50s than Carlton, but had 12 less marks inside 50s. So I think it just shows that he played such a man game that even when he wasn't getting the spoils or marks, they couldn't do anything with the football.
Definitely a special shout out to Nick Newman coming back in, alongside Brodie Kemp continuing good form. But yeah, I think Mitch Lewis ended with 2 goals in the end, but they weren't Wiedering's fault at all.
No, he was really good.
I think they were both from the freak.
Those kicks inside 50.
Who was it?
Wingard moments.
Yeah.
Just
either way.
it was one Wingard moment on the wing and then one in the pocket.
Yeah, neither can go against Wiedering on that one. But yeah, I think he's been in much, much better form recently. I think his combination with Kemp works really well. So yeah, hopefully he continues his form.
My 2 this week was to Nick Blakey. He played through one of the biggest, or a couple of the biggest legal hits we've seen this year.
That is true.
Both of them were very clean, and both times I thought he was going to go off and get subbed out.
I couldn't believe he kept going.
When he ran into Duncan, I thought he was done.
Yeah.
And then the one on Stewart was even bigger, and he just kept going.
I feel like for mine...
And it was 29 disposals.
Yeah, I feel like for mine, he played a bit too much wing.
Yep, okay, I get you.
That's why I don't have him in my votes or my mentions, but he's great. We've had him on the pod before, so...
8 spoils, 5 defensive half pressure acts, and then obviously 5 score involvements as well.
Not like on the pod.
I just
like,
thought...
We've put him in the votes before.
I'd like to have him on. I thought he was really good. So, yeah, Blakey was my... 3? 2?
2?
2.
You know I like the Lizard, so no arguments here. My 3 goes to someone who normally I don't consider a defender, so my 3 votes goes to Dan Houston.
A couple of weeks ago, it was the other round.
Yeah, a bit hard not to give him votes when he plays that way.
So I didn't this week, so I guess this makes up for the one you didn't. He was really good, wasn't he?
I feel like he did get some forward half possessions, but they were mostly intercepts from being pushed up so far.
Goal.
That helps. I wasn't going to mention it. What a moment, man! I literally was peeking out from between my fingers.
What a finish to that game.
13 intercepts, 454 metres gained, a couple of rebound 50s, 32 disposals. He's just continuing really good form, and I guess that is an equaliser. You have to do your 3.
I didn't know where you were going with the
Yeah, I was trying to remember which one you did.
Yeah, my 3 was Tom Stewart.
Fair enough.
Had 25 at 85%. Round high 12 rebound 50s for the competition. 631 metres gained, and then I put a game-saving asterisk tackle because if he hadn't done it, they would have lost, but they didn't win. And then 10 defensive half pressure acts and 4 tackles. It was a real gritty performance from him. I think the game really suited him. It was very hard and physical and very gritty, and he kind of loves that. So
you gave 2 people from probably the worst game on the weekend.
Well, I mean, it was a very defensive game of football. I think what made it so bad was the forward efficiency rather than the defensive and midfield run. Like, both teams were getting it in there and then just completely crapping the bed once it got there. So, hard game to watch.
I don't have him even in my special mentions. My Geelong special mention is Sam De Koning.
Sam De Koning. I had Jack Henry in there as well. I thought they were both really good.
think Sam De Koning is the best defender
they had the 2 best intercepts on the ground as well.
And I think it's insane to be playing Radaglia in the same side as De Koning. One or the other.
I had in my notes to mention later, but you brought it up with Radaglia.
We'll go back over it later.
The verdict is in that he can't be in the side when they're all fully fit. They looked so much more comfortable and structurally sound as soon as he went off in that game. They built up better behind the ball. And we should have seen the writing on the wall as soon as Mason Cox said he was going to be All-Australian, because that man has the worst takes in the game.
I can't really... I can, in a way, because it is due to his lack of defensive nous,
when Tom Stewart was just abusing him inside 50 because he was just wandering around at the arc, I was...
So many times he left his man behind. But he needs to be playing on a man, and he didn't have a man. And you can't... I think having De Koning and him in the team together doesn't work.
That's exactly the problem,
One or the other.
You can't have that, especially with Kolodajny there as well, who also takes a man. Henry can if needed to. He's got a very hybrid role.
Yep.
There's just
too
many...
I would much rather have Henry as my interceptor.
Too many marking and spoiling defenders if you've got him in there. So,
yeah.
Your 4, because I've done my 4.
We had never been mentioned on the show ever before. Mitch Hinge.
Yeah, I really liked his game as well. He got a special mention from me, but I did really like his game.
When I looked at the stats, I went, he needs to be in.
Yeah.
26 disposals,
I think
10 marks.
I joked to you about it. I said he kicked a point, get back up the other end at one point.
He kicked a goal. He kicked a goal.
Kicked a goal as well, yeah.
26 disposals, 10 marks, 12 intercepts, 668 metres gained, 9 rebound 50s. It's a pretty good performance.
Pretty good.
Never mentioned, 4 votes. Maybe we'll see more.
On you, Mitch Hinge. Been an array of Adelaide players get votes this year. I've really enjoyed that. It's been a nice spread. So then your 5, I guess, straight into it, if you want to...
Yeah, sure, Nick Haynes.
Okay, I had Nick Haynes in my votes all week, and I changed it to his fellow key defender in Sam Taylor.
All right.
But if you want to run through...
GWS 10, but to 2 different players.
10 GWS.
21 disposals, 8 marks, 13 intercept possessions, 525 metres gained, 7 rebound 50s, 6 1%ers, 11 pressure acts.
It was a pretty good game.
It's astounding.
Sam Taylor, 18 spoils, 19 pressure acts,
Yeah,
8 tackles as a key defender. Only 1 mark. It was in the wet, but it was an intercept contested mark. Those 2 were massive.
Yeah.
I know Melbourne's forward line isn't that great, but you still have to stop it.
Yeah.
And they did a really good job of making it as hard for them as possible. There's something so funny about teams selling games to interstate and then losing to a team way below them on the ladder. Melbourne's done it twice this year. Adelaide did it as well.
And Bulldogs.
Bulldogs as well. Stop doing it. Stop it. It's silly.
It is silly. I understand it from a money perspective, but if you're serious about winning the flag, don't do it.
It could have cost Melbourne a top 4 spot.
Yep.
They
are right
they
back
would
in the
put
pack now.
separation on the rest of those teams if they'd won that. And
Now
instead,
Bulldogs can worm their way
there's
in.
only but even then, it's only a game and a half from them to like 9th now. So it was a weird choice for them to make. But here we are again, Melbourne.
It was a Melbourne's forward line. I read a stat somewhere. I don't know if it was on Twitter or not. Over the last however many weeks, 5 maybe, they were 17th worst for scores.
That's insane.
Which is not indicative of a top 4
No,
side.
exactly. You got to have that balance, right? And they have the defence down pat. We've talked about this enough times.
I think their defence has, on its day, is the best in the league with Collingwood.
Yep.
And the forward line does not have the firepower to compete. I think Ben Brown was back this week.
Yeah. I don't know what their solution is. It's not Wiedemann.
Wiedemann's gone.
Other way around, yeah. He's gone to Essendon. Van Rooyen looks good in patches. He's not mature
He's
enough
still
yet.
young. He's still young.
It's not McDonald.
It's not Petty. Stop putting him there.
It's not Petty. He's a brilliant defender, one of the best gone around.
Their forward line really is made up of Fritsch, who went off, unfortunately, and Pickett, who's off and on as well.
Yes. And obviously Fritsch is great, but how much do you expect a third tall to do every week?
Do you think they have the salary cap space to bring in a big forward in the off-season?
I don't know. I think between Oliver, Petrarca, Gawn and Grundy, they're spending a lot of money. Lever and May are also
Some of that
getting...
Grundy money is from Collingwood.
Lever especially. Lever and May are getting paid a lot of money, Lever especially. So,
Did you mention Viney or Salem?
No, exactly. So they've got a lot of highly paid players there.
And if they're not paying Fritsch and Pickett a lot, they should be.
It worked really well for them, obviously in their flag year, with a balance of really underpaid players and really overpaid players. But it does mean that they probably don't have much room to bring in another star unless they trade one out, which is always an option, of course. But who would they trade out?
I mean, they did lose Hunter off the books, but I doubt that. Oh, no, sorry, other way.
They gained Hunter.
They lost. Went to West Coast. Hunt.
Close. Hunt. I only had 2 special mentions this week that we hadn't already mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
Which was Luke Ryan and Alia. I thought Luke Ryan's first half especially was really good, but then he kind of fizzled out of that game. Whereas Alia is good pretty much every week.
I might as well just pencil them in every week for at least votes or special mentions, but I've got Darcy Moore and Isaac Quaynor.
Isaac Quaynor, yep, I thought he'd be there. Who would have picked West Coast St Kilda to be almost the actual best game of the round?
Not me.
Shocking.
Not surprising, because St Kilda can't score. But
yeah, I said through the week, I was like, well, I even said it to our mate at one point, hi Tim, that I didn't see West Coast losing by that much this week, because St Kilda don't win by that much. They don't have that ability to score, but for most of that game, I thought West Coast were going to win. Even at the end, when it was 1 goal and 2 points and that kind of thing, St Kilda were just really struggling, and West Coast were matching them pretty much everywhere on the ground. It was almost frustrating to see how well they could play, even with some serious stars missing, because where has that been for the last 10 weeks? They matched them for effort and intensity all game. I think the pressure meter is silly, but it obviously is a bit of an indicator. They were off the charts in the first half.
Yeah, at one point.
So it means I've got something to work with, which is promising for them, I guess.
Backing up the effort.
It's about where has that been before, and can they keep it going?
And obviously St Kilda are in a good spot with their ladder position right now, but I think it might just be down to the fact that St Kilda's not as good as people think they are.
No, and I've been saying that, not very loudly, but definitely amongst us for a while. Like, I don't think St Kilda are very good. I thought, even before the West Coast game, I said to someone as a joke, because they said that they will definitely make the top 8 because they play 5 of the bottom 6 sides. And I said, well, they're a chance of losing 3 of those. And this was not one of the 3 that I said they were a chance of losing. Look, I think they will make the 8, but I also think that whoever gets them will be happier than playing anyone else that's currently in the top 8. It's like the opposite of having if Geelong, Sydney or Richmond sink in, the team who plays them will be worried because on their day they could come out firing. Yeah. Whereas I think it's the opposite scenario for whoever cops St Kilda. But we'll see. They could pull it together, but it's looking a lot like last year in a lot of respects. And it makes it really funny that they sacked a coach for doing last year what they did this year.
Yeah. They're doing slightly better this year, I think.
They are, but they've also had an easier draw because of where they finished last year.
True.
And I think they're another one of the teams that gets West Coast. Have they already played them? Maybe they haven't got them once. Doesn't matter.
Don't know.
But yeah, the ladder. I was saying at Wood in the shopping the other day when that West Coast and Kilda game was on, and I said to Beth, I said that every week I feel like I come on the podcast and I say I've expected the ladder to make more sense, and it makes less sense. And here we are again, first and second, great gap on third, good, and then fourth down to about 14th is like 2.5 games.
Yeah.
And it was just round 16. I wild. It's great for...
It's really opened up, especially for the teams in the lower half with better percentages like Sydney,
And-
Geelong, and even weirdly Carlton.
And now Geelong, Sydney and Carlton in the same realm on points with that draw. Richmond's percentage is really hurting them now.
yeah, Brisbane smashed that.
Yeah.
Kind of smashed their final chances away.
It's crazy. Whereas those teams that have had that big win, and Richmond didn't get that against West Coast. They only beat them by 4 or 5 goals. And that's really hurt their percentage and now chances of playing finals.
They've got them again.
Do they?
Yeah.
But it's here, isn't it?
It's here.
Yeah. So yeah, it's GWS are only 1 game out of the 8, and that's 1 game out of 7th.
Huge win from them.
Geelong are
against
half
Melbourne.
a game behind 7th, and that makes Carlton 2.5 games out of 7th. It's wild. And then Melbourne only 1 game ahead of that. A lot could happen between here and the end of the year because a lot of those teams are looking very similar in form. The one this weekend is St Kilda versus Essendon, which is fascinating in the sense that Essendon's only beaten 1 team in the top half of the ladder, and that was Melbourne in gather round, which is a weird anomaly.
Yeah.
And Adelaide have only beaten 1 team outside of Adelaide, and that's Hawthorn. So it's in Melbourne, which puts it against Adelaide's favour, but it's against the top 8 side, which puts it against Essendon's favour. So
I don't know why it puts it against Adelaide's favour if they're playing St Kilda.
no, they're playing Essendon.
St Kilda are playing Essendon.
Adelaide.
You just said St Kilda
Did
are
I?
playing Essendon.
No, Adelaide and Essendon is the game I'm most interested in this
Rewind.
weekend because Adelaide have only beaten 1 team outside of Adelaide, and it's Hawthorn.
I lost my phone somehow.
Essendon have only beaten 1 team inside the top 9, and it's Melbourne, but it was gather round. So those two playing at Marvel is a fascinating matchup for me, and it really could mean...
That's right. It's the only game that Adelaide are playing at Marvel all year.
all year. And it really could be who makes the 8 out of those two. Who wins
You'd
that
think
game.
based on form, even though Essendon played well against Port, I think Adelaide would have that.
Yeah, but they also lost to Gold Coast by about 120 points 2 weeks ago. Adelaide got murdered by Gold Coast 2 weeks ago, the last time they left Adelaide.
I don't remember that happening. Did that actually happen?
Yeah,
That sounds made up.
might have been a bit longer ago than that. Gold Coast was only 25 points. Felt
It
more
was
than
in
that.
Darwin.
Last time they left Adelaide.
Yeah.
So
I don't count Darwin games. It's weird.
well, Gold Coast sold that one, and unlike Melbourne,
They won both of
won.
their sold games
Yeah.
up there. Then they came back to
and got pumped.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't... It'll be interesting to see. But yeah, Adelaide almost should have beaten Collingwood a few weeks ago.
I'd say they should have.
But Essendon should have beaten the next best team.
I
on
don't
the
know
weekend.
I don't know about that.
They kicked the winning goal, and then they didn't. But
Yeah, so they didn't win.
you know that Adelaide, but they look like they
A
won
team
that
that
game.
was better wouldn't have pumped the ball like that outside 50 to an intercept marker.
I saw a thread that I was like, why is that there? I didn't click on it, but I realised about 20 minutes later that's why it was there. It said, pump kicks out of defensive 50 thoughts on Big Footy.
Yeah.
And I was like, I wonder why that's there. And then about 10 minutes later I went, oh, that's why it's
Yeah.
there. Yeah. It's
They're
Essendon
the deaths. Don't do that.
The best thread on Big Footy right now, it's been there for a few weeks, is Collingwood three-peat, question mark? They haven't won one yet.
They are in very good form.
They're
though.
in great form, and they should be massive favourites currently.
I think they are.
I know they are, but they should be, right? They're playing the best football in the comp. But
A two-peat is hard enough.
yeah,
A three-peat,
one's
ridiculous.
hard enough, even in a good year. Like
No one, when Hawthorn won their first of the 3, thought they were doing 3 in a row. Absolutely not. When Richmond won
couldn't
their
even get the
first,
second
no
one.
one thought they were doing multiple.
And then the next year was the year everyone thought they looked best in,
Yeah.
and they couldn't get past Mason Cox.
All it would take for Collingwood to slide right down would be key post injuries. If Moore and
Say Moore and Myercheck went down.
that would absolutely ruin them.
Yep, they looked much worse without Goey or anyway.
Yeah.
Like they were playing such better footy with him in the middle. But yeah, it only takes a little bit to knock a season over completely. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, finals always serves up different to what we'll expect.
I mean, even look at a good Geelong side losing Tom Stewart 2 years ago. Obviously not the flag winning
Made a huge
team, but
difference.
totally uprooted their plans. Whenever May or Lever are missing for Melbourne,
Or
when
even
someone that
Geelong-
important is gone.
Geelong missing Tom Hawkins in that prelim. It just makes a massive difference. And that's probably Tom Hawkins' fault for punching Schofield in the back
You
of the head.
can't,
But
you can't predict a three-peat.
no, and they're so hard to, and just personnel changes and other teams rising up. Who would have thought that Geelong and Collingwood would be the two teams last year? Like it was just
2020 when fucking Port Adelaide never left top on the ladder. They were top for the
I know,
entire year.
yeah.
Where's their three-peat? It's been 3 years.
They bottomed out and came back up. Yeah, no, you can't even. It's weird. It's silly.
Big
but
footy is a hive of scum and villainy. There's not much you can do about it.
It's funny. I feel like I go on there a lot less these days because I'm busier. But
Because you're annoyed with Jack Flash. Yeah, I know you're listening, Jack Flash.
oh, it's so funny. I saw him come out and say something about being confident in Geelong, and I was like, Are you sure? Lose by 60 to Melbourne. Yeah, okay. It's so funny.
Oh, poor big footy poster. It's being attacked for no reason.
For some reason. So
what?
do you think...
No.
Well, how many teams do you think will drop out of the 8?
Oh,
And if so, who do you think will make it?
St Kilda's out,
St Kilda's out?
I think. I think St Kilda and Essendon will... ideally, I think only one of those two will drop out.
Yeah.
I think St Kilda probably hold on.
Yeah, because of their draw.
Essendon have an easy draw too, but I'm still not personally convinced. And the only team I can see going in, truthfully, is Geelong.
Yeah.
GWS can turn things around, but I doubt it.
Their best is very good, but their worst...
Fremantle up and down. Gold Coast not happening. No. Sydney have to be a perfect run, but possible. Carlton left it too late. Richmond, no. Obviously, Hawthorn, North West Coast, no.
Yeah. Well, let's have a look. I'll go... The hardest part of Geelong's draw has already started, basically. Included Melbourne and then Sydney at the SCG. And then they've got Collingwood at the MCG. They've got Brisbane in Brisbane. And they've got Port in Geelong. They're their hardest games for the rest of the year. I'll try and find... If you want to grab GWS's draw, I'll grab Sydney's.
I like that the ladder predictor updates with each round as you go and keeps your picks.
Yeah,
So technically, I'm lying because my ladder predictor has Essendon staying and St Kilda dropping out.
Oh, okay.
However, I didn't take into account... Well, it obviously doesn't take into account the GWS are playing a bit better than they should be.
Yeah.
So,
Richmond, Sydney this week is hugely interesting. I think Sydney for me. But yeah, Sydney have the Bulldogs, Essendon in Melbourne, Adelaide in Adelaide, and Melbourne at the SCG are all huge games for their season. So if they can get 2 of those 3 or 4, then they're a good chance of making it. But yeah, like you say, most of those teams have to have the best possible run because that gap to 6th is obviously now 2.5 games for a lot of them. So it's hard, but I mean, if all the way down to Richmond can make it, which is bizarre.
Won't.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say Carlton and Richmond would have to win probably all but one game for the rest of the year to slide in there, and even then they'd be lucky.
Really tough for Carlton when they've got Port and Collingwood to come.
Yeah, and I think Richmond have a similarly difficult draw for the rest of the year, and no Tom Lynch, they're pretty much confirmed now. In Geelong's favour is the fact that Cameron Guthrie was out of a moon boot yesterday, and they're expecting him to be back in about 3 or 4 weeks. So if they do make finals, that's needed because their midfield doesn't cut it currently.
Yeah, but we've seen how he and Patrick Dangerfield have been going together recently. It's not been as good.
They do clash. Last year when one of them was out, the other one was often better.
Yeah.
So,
and it's usually to Guthrie's detriment.
Yeah, so Richmond, I've already said, have Sydney. They've got Melbourne, Bulldogs, St Kilda, and Port in Adelaide. So I think Richmond we can...
I am ruling them out.
Yeah, we definitely nix that.
I mean, I'm ruling out Carlton.
The chances of them winning...
Be totally honest.
Chances of them not dropping more than 2 of those games is very low, and they'd have to probably win all of them or only lose 1. So who knows? But it's been a fascinating season. I'm enjoying it.
Do you think it's...
While frustrated, obviously.
There's a lot of teams in the middle that are dropping games they shouldn't, but everyone's getting those bonus wins because of those bottom 3 sides, and Hawthorn have turned their season around a little bit, so it's hard to include them, but they're still getting... They've lost... what was it? I think they've lost 6 or 7 games by 80+. Mm-hmm. North have only lost 4 by 80+, so... And
North's a shame because they looked so promising at the start of the year, and then obviously really dropped off.
Always. It was never going to hold up.
No, and obviously those games were against a dismal Fremantle, and arguably that was deliberate, and Fremantle should have had a shot on goal, which would have at least levelled the score. And they were lucky to get over West Coast, like really lucky.
They play again in 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
In Perth instead of Tasmania, I think the first one was. So that'll be interesting if West Coast can keep some spirit. But if they get within 10 goals of Brisbane, I think that's even good.
Yeah.
Brisbane are at home terrifying currently.
Let's say Brisbane don't smash them off the park. Let's
Yeah.
say Brisbane win by, let's say, 10 goals.
Yeah.
But then they come back to Perth and get pumped by North Melbourne.
Oh, that'd be... I don't know how you'd look at that, right? Because then how do you weigh up the performance against St Kilda?
I don't understand what's going on with them, but I hope they do better.
Because I look at you lose by 170 points, and then Kelly and Yo go out of your team, and then you almost win. Like, arguably, your
Sometimes-
two best mids leave.
Sometimes relying on youth can do wonders.
It can, but it was Gaff and Shuey who were playing, and Barras and Hearn.
I thought Hewitt played really well.
I thought Hewitt was really good. That is true.
And I thought Long and Marriage were also
Long
really
was what I was
good.
trying to think of. Marriage was good.
And
I thought that Williams was probably one of his best games.
I say that weekly.
Yeah. We have very much said that we are a fan of Big Bad Bailey Williams on this podcast.
Yeah, who you call?
Big Bad Bailey Humphrey?
Yeah, you said that recently, and I was so unhappy with it. Belongs to Bailey Williams this year.
Yeah, well, I feel like you have to say Big Bad Bailey Williams to differentiate him from small tired Bailey Williams. That boy looks sleepy at all times.
I would be sleepy if I had to listen to Crazy Bevo.
Bevo quoting Che Guevara at you during the preseason with his big mo and little soul patch underneath it.
Pass.
The other one who looks tired, like Jai Amos looks like he has been starved and not slept for a
I'm
week
convinced he
before
might
every
be a
game.
vampire.
Yeah, I wonder. Maybe we should check his night performances versus day performances. He has to be a real close shout for the Rising Star.
He's going to kick more goals than Jesse Hogan did in the year he won the Rising Star.
And
Rising
more than
Star.
Machito Owens, who is everyone's favourite. He's averaging 2 goals a game just about for Freo, and they're not doing well.
He's getting into really good spots.
St Kilda have been beating teams far more often than Fremantle have, and Amos is doing better than Owens. So, and obviously Melbourne centric doesn't help with media online, and the Rising Star voters won't be as sucked into
Does
that.
Melbourne centric apply to St Kilda?
It's under their noses. It's at Marvel, which the AFL owns.
I guess.
I think Wardlaw fell apart. We thought he was going well. He was probably not playing well enough. But for me, it's Ashcroft. I think in a good team,
I think Ashcroft is the winner in my eyes.
He's ball winning, which is the difference for me. Ashcroft is he was seriously good for them in that first half on the weekend as they pulled away from Richmond.
I don't rate Owens as highly as everyone's saying.
No,
I think he's good, but I think I'd have him maybe 4th or 5th.
Yeah. It also doesn't help that he had to take a passenger seat when King came back.
Yeah.
I think he was the focus when both King and Membry were injured. And then King's come back in and...
I'd even probably have McElhaney ahead of him from Adelaide.
I really like... Well, I mean...
Defender podcast, so...
we're going to be pumping him. And Sheasel, people have fallen off of, despite the fact that...
He's still good.
Dacos was pretty much unanimous last year, and Sheasel's playing a similar role in a worse team.
It is strange. And I wonder if Sheasel will do the exact same thing Dacos has done this year.
And become a penetrating player instead of just a ball winner, ball getter, receiver. I think there's a good chance he will. We saw him play out forward in that game against Sydney that they should have won without the bench debacle, and he looked really good on the wing and on the forward flank.
Don't remind me. That's still... I think about that.
I'd forgotten about it then
much.
until I just said Sheasel's name because I remembered watching it I was walking into Perth Stadium and it was on the big screen at the side, and I was like, we'll just watch this for a second. And I'm like, what is going on?
It's one of the strangest things I've seen in a while.
Yeah, if anyone wants to accuse anyone of tanking, I feel like that's the moment. Clearly as an Hawthorn, because they've tried way too hard in way too many games this year to be accused of tanking.
All right, now's the time of the podcast where we talk about cricket instead of football.
Is it? All right.
Yeah. Because I've watched more cricket than I have football.
It goes for longer. It's easy to watch more of it.
Yeah, I'm convinced that's why my eyes fucked, because I'm just staring at a screen watching cricket.
Australia are cheats. Those old men did nothing wrong.
I can't believe that Australia would do this to the spirit of cricket.
I can't believe that at Lords they would...
How dare...
They would play by a rule written by the very people who are members of Lords.
How dare Khawaja talk back to those men? They invented the game. Brigglesby, McDonaghan...
Yeah,
and...
the subcontinent may have improved it far beyond our reach to a level that they have more money and more access to the game than we could have ever dreamt of, but those crusty old white men invented it.
Young Johnny Bairstow.
I do think that it's reached a point where it's such a media beat up.
Do we have to say that was a little sarcasm?
Yeah, just to point out, that was a stumping.
/S.
He threw it before he left his crease. Like, turn around and look before you leave your crease.
Wicket keeper.
You get taught that at like 12,
He's
maybe?
a wicket keeper.
He threatened Head with it. Apparently, Head went out today and said he threatened it with him in the same test. And Head turned around, put his bat back in. He said, would you have knocked it over if I was out? And he said, bloody oath, and ran off. So I think for me, they're doing a very clever media beat-up to distract from the fact that they're 2-0 down in the home Ashes and realistically lost both games
Because of baseball.
because of their own stupidity, right? Like, they were 1 for 180 in the first innings and collapsed to be down by 100 at the break. In the first test, they couldn't get out Cummins and Lyon for like 20 overs that lost them the game. Without Stokes in this test, playing an absolute poke the bear type innings, they would have lost by 100 again. And like this is such a distraction from how poorly they're doing to point fingers elsewhere and spirit of the game and everything like that. And I told you I was reading that article finally by Barney Ronay today, where he's talking about it being a cult. And it was really interesting how he just kept highlighting like all of these things that are in this like textbook of like, you might be in a cult. And he's like, and it's not saying that they like made it a cult on purpose. Like cults spring up all the time by accident. But like when you're like just fervently believing in what your charismatic figurehead has to say and saying everyone on the outside is wrong and this way is the only way. And also if you see yourself as a savior of something, which is very much the whole thing with baseball, like maybe look at what you're doing. And he said the funniest part was when he posted that article, millions of angry blind responses. And he was like, I like nothing could be more proof than just hundreds of people yelling at him online for questioning baseball, especially as a British sports writer. It will be interesting. I think they are a very good team and they could still win this series, but it's not looking like they will.
It's just insane to me that, obviously I'm not a cricket fan, but it's insane to me that they believe that they've just invented attacking style cricket.
And losing with it.
I think there's every chance that they come around in this third test and bat and bowl with the fire.
For sure. Also worth mentioning, Nathan Lyon was missing from both bowling innings.
Yes.
Just about the best bowler in the world. But yeah, it's so funny. I also wonder if, since he's such a stickler for the rules now, if Stuart Broad wants his 169 removed from the game that 4 Pakistani bowlers got arrested and put in prison for match fixing.
He said he said that this was the worst thing he's ever seen on a cricket field.
Not to mention, you saw 4 blokes get put in prison for deliberately bowling no balls to him as he made 169 runs. I think that might be worse. Maybe.
Nah, Spirit of Cricket was fine that day.
Yeah, that was okay.
Spirit of Cricket only matters when...
Spirit of Cricket means England sad. Because it's like the holy spirit of cricket. Like it's just a bunch of white old ghosts hiding in the corner being really upset. It's good. I love a bit of outcry. It's like in footy when every now and then, a bunch of crusty old people like Robert Shaw will come out and say they hate something. And I'm like, oh, something's going good. That's okay. That's probably fine.
There was a fucking Gary Lyon going off about someone taunting someone the other day.
Oh, no, it was old mate we actually like. Dunstall.
Oh, it was Dunstall.
Yeah, and I was like...
Sorry, I just automatically assumed it was someone I didn't like.
Taunting, but also, when Mason Cox does it, it's funny. When Eric Hipwood does it against the spirit of the game, should knock him out. What does he say? Chin him.
Chin him. He said chin him in this concussion era. Don't use that term.
Especially, and I don't want to, someone could be like, hey, mate, weren't you just on the ground for Spud's game, a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah.
Maybe bring that language back a little bit.
Yeah.
It's the same as when, to bring back to the cricket, Nathan Lyon's comments immediately, I watched one of my best friends die on the cricket field. I'm not going out there to get concussed. It was such a weird, for someone who seemed to have evolved quite well post macho wankery game, it was a weird comment from Dunstall to revert straight back to form of, just chin him.
If Richmond go up to the Gabba where they've had a bit of a rivalry with Brisbane and Brisbane pumped them by 80, regardless of whether they're missing Lynch and Martin or whatever.
And as a Geelong fan,
go off.
In similar note, I would expect them to do it to Geelong as well. There's been enough heat there in the last few years that they'd want to say something because they've beaten Brisbane in some important moments for Brisbane, especially out the Gabba.
I was thinking that one where, was it McCarthy who kicked the goal-winning goal and everyone in the team kicked it out of bounds 18 times. It was the record. I think about that game as one of the best... in quotation marks, rivalry games in a while.
Yep.
I really enjoyed that one. But yeah, I don't know. I think being chirpy with your opponent is fine. It's a game.
As long as you don't
I would feel differently if I don't know who kicked the last goal for Sydney. If they got it to they got over 200 and they all went over to someone and ripped into them.
It's a bit different in some circumstances, or trying to show it before you get to the goal and looking very silly if you miss it. But that's funny for me. So
what about Ash Johnson?
Ash Johnson. I don't know if you've seen this, but you'll find the footage if you just look up Ash Johnson on Twitter.
Yeah.
So he's not playing seniors at the moment. He's playing twos for Collingwood. And he showed someone the footy way too far out from goal to be showing someone the footy. I'm talking like 80
He was just coming out of
metres.
defensive 50.
And anyway, off he went for a run and then didn't bounce the ball properly.
Got chased down.
It
Got
probably
pantsed.
should have been a leaking free kick to him, but it did. The umpire probably was just like, nah, mate,
What a
you've
dickhead.
earned this one. And there's a few like that it's always really funny. But like I said, one of my favourite moments was Sicily following Danaher all the way back to the goal square after kicking a goal, just asking for a high five for the goal assist. Like, that's funny. Like, I like that kind of stuff.
Like, as long as it's not like
Also, Dunn still played with
mean-spirited. Yeah.
Especially Brereton not chirping. I guess he did get chinned a few times, so maybe that was his point.
I guess the difference is if you're talking about football acts, it's fine. If you're having to go with their friends or family or whatever.
I probably would have chirped Bolter purely because I was annoyed at the commentator saying how well he was playing and
He
he
got
finished
pantsed.
5 goals.
He got pantsed.
And they still don't even the best online.
No, it drove me insane.
If your direct opponent kicks 5 goals, it doesn't matter how well you play because your main job is to stop them from kicking goals.
If I was Vlosten, I would have been ripping out whatever little hair was left, honestly.
That's why Brody shaves his head now.
Yeah.
Brody and Vlosten. They've got to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's gone.
Not to say Bolter's bad. He's been in our votes a couple of times, but he had a shocker on the weekend.
Yeah, I think he's very capable of that when he tries to play too much of a running game.
It depends on where they need him for.
Yeah.
It's harder for him with Broad and
Vlosten both
there.
playing. Yeah, but he's not the second coming of Alex Rance as I think people once thought he was.
No.
Because he was playing in a very good team. And now that they're struggling a bit more, his performances are a bit over the shop. Whereas Broad and Vlostone are quality defenders, and we keep seeing that this year. And yeah, it's interesting to see where Richmond are at because their kids do look good. It's a wonder if they can get it together enough before the senior players are all off the list, or if they'll have to wait for those kids to become the senior players with where they're headed. I think there's a few teams in that boat at the moment. I think Geelong are in a very similar spot of just kind of that transition period of whether you can get the kids to the level that you need before the seniors are gone, rather than having to build a whole new team. But we'll see. There's only, 8 weeks of footy left before the finals?
It's exciting.
And there's only 3 teams I'm confident top 4. And many teams I think have a chance of somehow getting in there. And the Bulldogs best.
Well, I'm
and
glad
worst is-
Brisbane came around because earlier in the year I was very bullish on them and they looked to be back. So
their first few weeks were shaky. And then suddenly they've just
when
played.
they beat Collingwood, it came back a little bit.
Yeah, they've also just played about 10 straight weeks of some of the most exciting football I've seen a team play in a long time. They and Port are playing... Collingwood play exciting football by the nature of the way their games finish is constantly exciting. And it just seems unsustainable. They proved last year it wasn't. It's going into this year. Whereas Port and Brisbane are just playing just really good football. And we talked about Brisbane grinding out that win against St Kilda last week. And how un-Brisbane that performance was. And something people have criticised Brisbane for a long time is being unable to defend in those kinds of games when they can't just attack all out. And it might just be the extra side they needed to their game. Bringing in players like Wilmot, Payne coming on.
As I said, youth can do a lot.
Coleman is another one you've mentioned this week. I really like how Brisbane are playing. And I loved Brisbane as a kid because they were just one of those teams that didn't matter how dominant they were. They had such iconic players that were so exciting to watch. And I feel like that's where they're at now. I love watching especially Ashcroft, but you watch Neil and Dunkley run out of that midfield and it's just so fun to watch. And they play a ruck as a sub every week and still win. I don't know. Like it flies into conventions of football, but it works. They've got 2 of the least consistent key forwards in the comp, and somehow they're only consistent together. But they've also got Cameron and McCluggage and Bailey who will kick 3 and 5 goals when they need them as well. So if they don't get it soon, I think questions will start being asked of how long they can be thereabouts.
I guess we'll find out a bit more about them. They've got Melbourne at the MCG in a few weeks.
I call a prelim a pass grade for them this year.
Winning?
No, I think making. I don't have to make the grand final. Because Port and Collingwood are very good. I think they just have to make a prelim this year.
The biggest question is the MCG.
Yes.
Like I said, they've got Melbourne in 2 weeks, and then they're playing Collingwood in round 23 at Marvel.
There's a very good chance that Collingwood sold a couple of games to Marvel this year.
That is
because
disastrous
they were running out
for
of
Brisbane.
cash, as we know. But yeah, it is because they need that warm-up game.
Yeah.
But
against the best of the best this year. I think it's a real shame that we're not seeing that at the MCG because that'll really tell us about Brisbane's finals chances.
It does. That is the biggest problem, I think, is that. The biggest thing in their favour is that whichever team they play in the first week of finals will be probably Collingwood or Port, which means likely the team they play in a prelim, one of those two games won't be at the MCG. There's a very good chance they'll be able to play an interstate game, whether they win or lose the first prelim. Qualifying final.
Yeah.
So they'd be happy with that, because it wasn't the case last year when it was Geelong, Melbourne. They beat Melbourne at the MCG last year.
It also depends if Melbourne hold on to fourth. Obviously, that's another potential MCG host. But if an interstate team like Adelaide, which probably won't, but if Adelaide could sneak up that high, that would be huge for shaping what happens in the finals.
Be awesome. I'd love to imagine
if the
Derby qualifying.
Yeah, second and third, that would
showdown?
be insane.
I was talking to Beth about it the other night. The Derby grand final we just missed out on.
Yeah.
When Sydney beat Freo.
Yeah.
But pumped them in the end. Didn't matter. But like, how good would that have been? And I feel we just haven't had any of those big rivalry grand finals.
Is that 2015?
No. That was back like 2006.
Weren't we also in?
We almost had a Derby like.
No, I'm pretty sure the year
Did we
that
have one that year as well?
when Fremantle were doing well in the 2014.
When they were coming down from
Yeah.
and West Coast were going up to, maybe. But yeah, I feel like we don't get enough of. We haven't really had any rivalry grand finals in recent years. Like Geelong Richmond formed into a rivalry around the era of that, and so did Geelong and Hawthorn kind of rebuilt it. But we haven't had a Collingwood Carlton, Collingwood Essendon, or obviously West Coast Freo, Port Adelaide. We haven't had any of those matchups, and I'd love to see it. Like I feel like that would make an amazing grand final day.
Would be insane.
Even Collingwood Brisbane, I think, still has enough in it from the hatred from Brisbane Collingwood back the other way.
2015, West Coast beat North to go to the grand final. Hawthorn beat Fremantle to go to the grand final.
Okay. So we almost had it in a grand final twice, which, considering Freo's record, impressive.
North finished 8th that year. That's crazy.
Yeah, they beat Geelong to get there.
Not in the finals.
No?
Geelong didn't make finals that year.
Oh, different year. There's another year North...
Geelong finished 10th, which is the lowest I've seen them in.
Yeah, it's
ever.
the only year they missed. But I think it was the year before maybe that North beat Geelong. And everyone goes off that, Pythagorean ladder.
Yeah.
It's like your whatever expected wins. And that's one of the years they love to use as an example because North would have had more wins than Geelong that year before they made the finals.
What a crazy ladder.
What a crazy ladder. What year was that?
2015.
15? What are we going? Give me the top 8.
Fremantle, West Coast 1 and 2.
Shit, okay.
Hawthorn 3rd, Sydney 4th, Richmond 5th, Western Bulldogs, Adelaide North, and then sitting right outside were Port and Geelong.
Crazy.
Richmond went out straight away. That was the era for them.
Mm-hmm.
I think they did it the next year as well. And
everyone mocked Brendan Gale for his 5-year plan.
Hawthorn lost first week to West Coast and then beat them in the grand
I think
final.
remember that. Yeah. Lost here, beat them there.
Wild.
All right. Well, we've reached the
I'm looking at
former
Wikipedia
ladders part of the podcast. That's probably a good place to leave it for this week. But I'm genuinely excited for this weekend's footy. There's so many results that even games that look like they shouldn't be close on paper,
I just want to find out before we go.
their season's on the line. Richmond, Sydney, whoever loses that, their season's over. Bulldogs, Collingwood should be a super exciting game if Bulldogs bring their best footy. St Kilda, Melbourne.
I just want to correct myself really quickly.
And you're going on Sunday to the football.
No, I'm passing in the end.
You're not going.
I've got too much going on. I just want to quickly clarify when I said they
whoever
lost their
loses
first
that
game.
season could be over as well.
Richmond lost the first final in 2015, then they missed finals completely, and then they won the premiership the next year.
Good on them.
They finished 13th, which is crazy.
So the Sunday twilight time slot, which famously produces some of the best games of the week every week, even though it's where the AFL tries to hide games.
We're just continuing after the outro this week.
It's Freo Carlton, and the game before that is Essendon Adelaide, which are two of the most
Good
interesting
stuff.
games of the weekend. We'll leave it there. We will see you next week. Find us at the Back Pocket on everything, except for things where it's at the Back Pocket AU, which is most of them. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.
See ya.